beautiful day on the mountain. Beautiful people.
Welcome to the Beautiful People podcast. I'm your host, Taryn Johnson. I invite you to join me in this space where energy fuels your empowerment and transformation becomes a way of life. Listen in as I share stories of beautiful people learning to align with their true selves as they break free from limiting beliefs and become the beautiful creator of their reality. I know you are ready to step into your own empowerment, raise your frequency, and learn how to manifest a life that reflects your soul purpose. So let's kickstart that desire and learn how human design can amplify transformations in your life and increase the speed at which you reach your biggest life goals. This podcast will forever be dedicated to my sister-in-law, Kathy Johnson, who taught me just how beautiful life is and that everyone's story deserves to be shared. Now let's get started. Hey, Ashley, welcome to the Beautiful People podcast. How are you?
I'm doing so good. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. It's great that we get to connect on this platform, and I'm very excited to share your story with our audience. So if you want to kickstart us off, do you want to give a little intro about yourself?
So my name's Ashley Gonzalez. I am the owner of my business, Move, Breathe, Heal. Fun fact, it's actually in its second year birthday month this month.
Yay!
So yay. I really like to offer a one-stop shop of different healing tools that fuse the science and the spiritual together. So I offer a bunch of different tools like human design, astrology. I'm a breathwork practitioner. I do somatic movement and infuse neuroscience. If it's something to do with healing, I offer it.
It makes sense why your business is called Move, Breathe, Heal, because you literally have targeted everything just within your business name, which is so cool.
Well, thank you. It was a fun download, that name.
I love it. All right, Ashley, I want to quick touch on, I guess, how we met and how our lives kind of got connected when we first met in Arizona. So do you remember when we first met and where it was?
Wasn't it at the Leading Ladies marketing or networking events, I mean?
Yes, yeah. So we connected at Leading Ladies, and I don't remember even how like we first got involved, but I just remember being like really drawn to one another, and we were like, hey, we need to meet up and like talk about all things human design, astrology, energy, because I think I was still coming into my awakening of getting into the spiritual stuff, and you also were diving deep, and you had like the books and the resources and the tools, and you were on like a crazy role of just building your brand and your business. And I remember like reaching out to you.
I actually do remember now. I remember you were and like you were checking people in for Mary. And I remember overhearing you talking about human design. And I immediately looked over at you and was like, I've never met somebody who even knows what human design is outside of, my own books or well, not my books, but the books that I would read on it and communities that I was maybe in online, but I had never met somebody outside of that online circle who was also into human design. And then we later figured out that we both followed Manifestation Babe, we both followed James Wedmore, and we're into a lot of the same things. And we knew we just had to get together. We met for coffee, I think, pulled up both of our charts, and they were almost identical.
Yeah, it was
Because
crazy.
you were the only other person I knew that had like certain energy centers that aren't common. And we both had them. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a mirror moment. And it was a really cool, unconventional way of meeting each other.
I think what's wild is since those moments when we first met, a lot of like what's been happening in our lives have weirdly mirrored each other in different areas
Yes.
too. So like even if our energies are similar, like we've both been traveling in a like forward trajectory and encountering different things, and we can come together on those obstacles or those moments of healing and like, girl, what is happening? And we feel like the same vibes and energies, and it's just been so cool to be able to connect on so many different levels.
Yes, I remember just from the first time meeting you that there was this deep, I don't even know how to say it other than like frequency connection with the two of us. There was a deep, deep understanding that didn't even need to be verbalized, that we just got each other's energy.
Yeah, and it was like pretty immediately, which is super cool. And I think what's been awesome is just watching your growth now throughout the years and just seeing where Move, Breathe, Heal is and how you're just impacting your community in Arizona. And it's just so cool to see.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. It's had many transformations in the last 2 years. So it's really I really love where Move Breathe Heal is at right now and where it's going and the plans that I have ahead for it. So thank you.
Yeah. So where were you kind of at when we first met? And then how have you been able to utilize a lot of the different aspects that we kind of talked about together, like human design and you're really into astrology? How have you been able to use those to kind of get your business to where you want it to be right now?
Great question. So when you and I had met, I had just launched Move Breathe Heal like 3 or 4 months before that. And I had also just barely moved to Arizona too. My husband and I had just bought our first house a few months, or our first house here a few months prior. And I remember the first friend that I met here was actually our real estate agent who also went to the Leading Ladies events. And I am not a person who normally would go out to network or go to a place by myself and put myself out there in that way. And so she invited me to go, and I was like, I don't know. But I went, and just kind of grew from there. And I started going every month to start kind of regulating myself into being seen and putting myself out there using the tools that I teach, you know? And so when you and I had met, Move, Breathe, Heal was in its brand new baby stages. I hadn't even started doing in-person events yet with breathwork, or it was completely online at that point. I had been offering human design readings for about a year and a half at that point. And little did I know that, just very shortly after you and I had met, trigger warning for any grievers out there, I was about to go through some personal family losses. And little did I know that the way that I wanted to help people with Move, Breathe, Heal, I always, my intention with Move, Breathe, Heal was always to help people in a deeper way and to help people process and regulate themselves through whatever tool resonates with them. Because I've personally tried like every single healing tool out there in the book from the time I was 16 years old. And so going through that experience of loss very shortly after you and I had met, it's just brought such a deeper layer to Move, Breathe, Heal over the last year and a half or so that I never could have helped people in that way, to that depth, I suppose, in a weird way, had I not gone through that experience. And I know that you can relate to that experience as well of loss.
Yeah, I just remember watching you had lived through so much grief, and that taught you to become the most amazing healer with your breath work and your sessions. And I remember shortly after you made some grief breath works, and I lost my grandpa like a year, I think around a year after you lost some family members. And I was like, Ashley, help. Like, what do I do? I'm super pregnant. I can't regulate my emotions. I can't overly cry super hard. And you sent me like the most amazing recording of how to do breath work while pregnant to keep the baby
Mhm.
safe and be able to regulate yourself. And it helped me just release so much emotion I had pent up. And I truly don't think that if you hadn't gone through those life experiences, you would have been able to touch like those points I needed so deeply, which it's horrible when you're in the moment and you're grieving, but you've had the most beautiful year of healing. And it's been just phenomenal to watch your business transform and just see how connected you are now to not only your brand and your clients, but just like yourself as an individual.
Thank you so much. It's been a journey, and Move, Breathe, Heal has truly been like my biggest challenge in a lot of ways. I had a business prior to Move, Breathe, Heal, a whole other, what feels like a separate life, as an esthetician, and I helped people with their skin and did eyelash extensions for about 6 years before Move, Breathe, Heal. And the one thing I can say is that this is so much more in alignment because it challenges, it almost triggers me in a way. And I'm like, oh, that's how I know that we're doing something right here. And we're not just staying in the safe zone of helping people in a more superficial way, I suppose. Not that being an esthetician is always superficial, but the part of being an esthetician that I loved the most was the one-on-one time I would get with my clients. And I had lots of people, looking back now, a lot of my clients would call my lash room the therapy room. I used to joke that my lash room was kind of the unofficial, protected by HIPAA room, but you're safe here, and after, closing that chapter and having a little bit of a void period for about 8 months of not knowing what was next, Move, Breathe, Heal started to get downloaded into my brain and started to be born. And I was able to find human design right before I opened Move, Breathe, Heal. And all I can say is it was a force bigger than me that just took over. I downloaded pretty much everything there was to know about human design within like a 2-month period, which is wild to think about with how many layers there are to human design. And that, learning about my own human design and starting to offer readings in that way led me to create Move, Breathe, Heal, and led me to do what lights me up. And what lights me up is to create safety and to teach people how to properly process and regulate their emotions from a top-down approach with the, tools like human design and astrology, and the bottom-up approaches of regulating the nervous system using neuroscience and whatnot. So
Love that as an esthetician, you already were able to just like people naturally opened up to you. And now you have like the certifications and trainings to like literally know how you can help them in such a more impactful way. And being someone's ear is always impactful, but to help them with breath work and just regulate their nervous system on a deeper level is probably so fulfilling and rewarding. And I remember when we met too, we kind of had that mirrored life transition where because I was going through going to medical school, I applied for a bunch of programs. I took my MCAT and I had this whole medicine and health identity tied to me. And it's so weird when you leave something that you're so tied to and you have to find a new path. And that's where I found human design was when I kind of lost the identity of a medical student or like the becoming a doctor, and human design helped me validate like my direction and my path. And I know that's exactly what you use it for too. And I was blown away when we first talked about human design and you were like, I have all these tools, all these resources. I read these books and I was like, girl, how do you absorb this information so quickly? But now seeing like you encompass so many things in your business, it comes naturally to you. And it's just incredible to be able to use those tools and resources and keep making an impact on the lives of others.
yes, and it's funny you say that because part of my own human design chart, I have kind of that natural, I don't know how you would word it, but
Like
kind
the
of the
lifelong learner and you can like pick up
yes.
on the education stuff really quickly.
Yes, but I didn't know that about myself. And this particular part that I'm talking about is the profile lines. And so I'm
Mm-hmm.
a line 2, which is that natural learner, but us line 2s don't know that we're good at something. Like it kind of has to be called out of us. And so I remember when I met you and you were like, how do you absorb all of this? And I had been thinking to myself, like, I'm not absorbing enough. Like, I don't know. It's just so funny how human design validates those things, even though they might be subconscious to you. And then you figure it out and you're like, oh, That's what that is. I need to lean into that, not push it away and not think there's something wrong with me.
Hmm. So many people go through life just thinking like, oh, this comes easy for me. It should come easy for others. But that's not the case. It's actually just unique to them. And what I love doing in my business and teaching is telling people like how their design works, but then applying it. So like, hey, say for
Yes.
year two, which is kind of how I explain it is in your personality, you have an inner personality and an external personality. And when you learn, like internally, that's how you're supposed to be, and that's how you are, and that's okay. And you can actually strengthen that to help you get like what you want and help you with your life direction. It can be so astronomical in your changes and can just like majorly add trajectory to your life. And it's just awesome to be able to apply that. And that's what I love doing is helping people have that application. Like there's someone there to be like, okay, you know how your energy works now. Like let's rewire your brain, the neural connection, so that you know how to make decisions now based on your true energy and how you're meant to work.
Yes, it's like I've I've learned over time that one of my gifts is to take all of that esoteric language. Because I
Hmm.
remember when I first learned about human design, it was before human design was I mean, same
It's
with you. It
becoming more
was
popular now. Hmm.
Yes, it was before it was super mainstream and there weren't as many resources out there on it. And so I remember thinking like, okay, this makes sense to me. I'm reading this book, I'm listening to all the information. This makes sense to me, but how can I make it make sense to
Hmm.
the masses? Because this is such a valuable tool. And I've had so many people, I know that you've had this experience too, where you get to just see those light up breakthrough moments in people of like, I have never felt this seen and
Hmm.
understood before. And I always tried to shy that part away from me. Like for me, one of the examples of that would be the manifesting generator side of being a multifaceted, multi-passionate, and quick to pivot person.
Hmm.
Um, it's kind of funny because I don't know a single manifesting generator that hasn't been clinically diagnosed with ADHD. Like, is it ADHD or is it just that
Me living
you're
in my alignment.
yes. Yes. So to release that shame of, oh, I don't need to pick a niche. I don't need to just
Hmm.
pick one career or whatever. I don't need to be living from a place of should. And in fact, if I am living from a place of should and making decisions from a place of should, that's not correct for me. And that
Hmm.
drains me and makes me tired. And, so just learning these things about yourself and now being able to share that with other people in a way that makes sense in their day-to-day lives. This is what it looks like. This is what it feels like in your body. Now let's regulate into the true version of you instead and release all that deconditioning and rewire those neural pathways so you
Hmm.
can feel safe in your body, so you can feel safe being you, the
Hmm.
true you.
And I feel like the spiritual community is really grasping this. And it's crazy because I was just looking up some articles in neuroscience because I got my undergrad in neuroscience and my master's in gerontology to study aging and elderly. Because originally I was going to go to medical school and, work with older adults and I wanted to understand them in a holistic way. But I'm realizing now that neuroscience and science itself is starting to really understand how your neurons connect in these ways and that your brain works in certain patterns and it's at this cellular level where your energy stems from. So using human design kind of as a medium to help people at the body level and the neurological level is just so groundbreaking. And I'm excited to see where this field goes and exactly how to keep helping people. And I love what you said, breaking out of the should. I think that's such a big
Mhm.
issue. A lot of people don't even realize that they're doing until they are realized that they don't have to be doing that. And I know I was a big people pleaser and I had to break out of that pattern and just realizing like saying yes to what lights you up. And it's okay if it's in 20 different directions and it feels like a ping pong game and you're trying to figure out what you want to do with your life, your business, your career, and just realizing like it's okay as long as you're not forcing and you're just following that flow that you know you have in you.
100%. I used to, I mean, prior to knowing my human design and astrology and all those things too, I used to feel so messy as a person and just felt like, why can't I just pick something? Why can't I just be like everyone else, right?
Conform to how society tells you you need to pick one career when you're either out of
Right.
high school or out of college and you just stick with that for the rest of your life. Like we're realizing how boring, draining, tired, burnt out. That's not what living on Earth when we have mountains and deserts and there's pyramids. Like, what are we doing
Right?
in one
What
career
are we
path?
doing?
What are we doing? Yeah, so breaking free of that mold and being
Yes.
okay with it and then learning to honor it and then work with it, which is what you've exactly done.
And it takes time,
Mm.
right? I mean, learning your human design, learning your astrology, learning, the logical side of things, the logical side of the brain, that's great. It brings awareness, it connects the some subconscious things to the conscious. But especially if you're talking about somebody who, I mean, we all have conditioning, we all have, childhood, big traumas, little traumas, whatnot. But if you are working with somebody who has had a really hard life and has a lot of those big T traumas, or is maybe in crisis mode, just lost someone or grieving or whatever it may be, going through a divorce, all these things, um, that is a side that I just felt like wasn't talked about as much in the, okay, I know this, but it's not easy to break those patterns. And we have to kind of train our bodies and retrain our minds. And that's what's so cool about the neuroscience piece of it is that our brains have neuroplasticity and it doesn't matter what age you are, it can be rewired. Those pathways can be rewired. I actually put that together for the first time in 2019 when my father-in-law unexpectedly had multiple strokes. And he, thankfully he's okay and he made it on the other side, but he lost all function of his left side of his body at one point and had to relearn to walk, relearn to talk, relearn to eat, all these things. And I remember thinking then, this was long before Move, Breathe, Heal started and long before I got into the nervous system regulation stuff. I remember the doctors saying, these parts of your brain or his brain are now dead. Like they are
Mm.
non-functioning parts of the brain, and you could see it on the scans. And the way that you're able to relearn how to walk is by building new neural pathways. And so I remember thinking then, like, wait a minute, if that can be done on a physical level, why can't that be done with emotions, with limiting beliefs, with, things like that? And that's really where I started to pivot from being an esthetician into learning about this stuff, was from that experience of that very scary experience of almost losing my father-in-law.
Yeah, it's wild when we're in those situations and you just can be like angry and upset and questioning why you're in there, but then being able to fast forward and look back and be like, wow, like that changed your life path. Like that put little seeds in the ground for you to now water and grow into something completely different and develop into the person you were before. And again, it's so difficult when you're in it, but to now be
Mm-hmm.
out of it and look back almost with appreciation, like if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have had pivoted in this direction. It's just a great mindset to really be able to develop and hone into as well.
It really is crazy when I look back on it now because I mean, even just within the last year and a half, experiencing grief and loss in a very traumatic way. I I am a person who really doesn't love the phrase everything happens for a reason when it comes to grief because
Hmm.
it's just not helpful to somebody who is
It's not
grieving and
healing.
is really in the middle and in the thick of it. But looking back now, I'm so grateful that that I did download all of those tools and felt like, I have to leave aesthetics. I have to learn about this stuff right now. And I felt crazy at the time, honestly, especially because I had a fully booked clientele at the time. I had a great space to work in. I was working with great colleagues and everything. It just didn't make sense for me to pivot at that time, but I did. And I'm so glad that I honored that. That's one of those pre human design knowledge moments that I look back at now and I'm like, oh, that's when I was honoring my yes. That's when I was honoring um, my gut response and didn't even know it at the time. And so now I can use those examples of like, okay, this is how it feels in your body. And I can teach other people, close your eyes for a second and think of a time where you made a decision that was really super in alignment to you, or that felt really inviting to you if you're a projector, or that felt really peaceful to you if you're a manifester, all of these things. I can, teach people how that feels in their body just from that experience of, from the father-in-law to leaving aesthetics to learning about human design, feeling like I was going through a total quarter life crisis at that time, to now feeling so grateful that I did. Because what is the point, really, of going through the suck, going through those really, really challenging, traumatic moments if you don't alchemize it into something useful? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
We
exactly.
can spread the pain that we feel, or we can alchemize it into something good and something beautiful. And I guess I'm proud of myself for being able to lean into that gift of alchemy.
Yeah, it's like taking the energy and then using it to empower your next steps. And it's even
Mm.
more powerful when it comes in the form of grief, and the grief is your fuel. When you can learn to use grief and transform it into a next step energy. I really worked on transforming my grief with Kathy and even my grandpa into how can I continue to go on living life, but also honoring them and expanding on their
Mm.
energies that they had when they were living on earth. So, like with Kathy, I just remember she would always be like, Taryn, you need to be nice. You need to be like loving. You have to be kind and be great towards people and like see everyone for who they are and where they're at. And I'd always joke with her and I'd be like, Kathy, like you're too nice. Like what? And then my grandpa, he just was always so involved in his community and bringing people together and just sharing like his laughter and his jokes and being able to change and take those things that you loved about them and then build something with it, kind of like this podcast. Like a lot of people might not know, but Kathy and her friends are on a ski lift going up the mountain that she passed on in the intro of my podcast. And each time I get to
Oh,
listen to it,
wow.
it's Kathy's laugh and her friends just in a
Oh.
moment of pure joy. And they're saying, like, look at all the beautiful people and the beautiful mountains. And that was like her energy and just being able to honor that and taking that like hurt, but fueling from it to help other people and spread that energy, it just becomes such a hidden passion I didn't know I had. And that's what fueled this. And so it's crazy that you can go through some of the most tragic moments, but if you can find a really good support group, which, I had in you and a lot of the community we had built, you can really come out on the other side and make that impact in the lives of others in the way that they could have too if they were still here.
That is such a beautiful perspective. I love that. We really do almost become a vessel for their spirit in a way to be able to, allow their spirit to live on through us. And grief really teaches you to sit with multiple truths at once. It can be so gut wrenching, so heart wrenching, and you're so angry too that they've left. And at the same time, it brings you to such a deeper level of love that I'm not sure can be experienced without that grief. Like it really, I used to joke with Gage that I feel like I almost shifted dimensions. Not to get too woo,
And Gage
but
is her husband, just so no
oh
one's like,
yes.
who is Gage?
Gage is my husband. I used to joke with him that like I feel like I'm on a different realm now
You shift
almost.
timelines. Yeah.
You shift and your love is different. Your connection to spirit is different and things get awakened within you that you had no idea were there before. And so it's kind of one of those things where once again it's like, am I going to allow this grief to completely change? Well, it does change you. Let me rephrase
Whether you
that.
want it to or not. Yep.
Yes. Am I going to allow this grief to completely consume everything about me? And there are some days that, yes, it does, and it will. Um, but again, we can either spread that pain that we're feeling, or we can alchemize it into something good and something beautiful and something healing. Um, because we're not the only ones who have experienced those traumatic events. And there are things that just aren't talked about. I remember even in the human design space or the astrology space, there's not a lot of talk about like doing what lights you up as a generator or a manifesting generator, and how that can feel nearly impossible when you're in the thick of that feeling of loss or just going through a really hard time. And to be able to open up those conversations now is really cool and really beautiful.
Yeah. And I remember before we started recording this podcast, we both were like, I don't know if we're going to touch on the subject of grief because it's both hit home hard. And we're like, we'll let whatever message comes out. So I really think that this message is going to be super impactful for the listeners. And also, if you haven't experienced a loss of like a loved one yet, remember like grief can come at any level to you. So it could be like a loss of a friendship, even like a loss of like an animal, a job. Grief can come in so many ways. So I just want our listeners to be able to feel validated at whatever level of grief they have. But I'm also thankful that Ashley is, on this podcast with us because she has been a great tool and a great resource for grief. So if there is something that you're dealing with or need someone to talk to, I consider myself an ally in grief, but Ashley like can really help regulate you and just really be your confidant person if you do need someone. And so I just wanted to give, Ashley another shout out too in case this is really hitting home for you.
Thank you so much. And even a grief of self, too. I mean, how many times in our lives do we go through a complete identity shift? And there's things that we have to let go of
Mm,
within ourselves in order to step
yes.
into that, even with the nervous system or neuroplasticity stuff. If you have had a certain belief about yourself or the world your entire life, there's going to be some loss of attachment to that belief when you're regulating into the next belief. So there's grief around that as well. And all forms of grief are welcome at Move, Breathe, Heal, welcome with Taryn. And
Yeah, that's such an
yeah.
excellent call out, Ashley, because I remember like I think my first like relation to grief, like besides my like childhood dog dying, was literally like grieving my loss of identity and being in medical school because I studied
Mm,
all throughout my undergrad. I got my master's to go do it, and then after the pandemic and I realized I didn't want to be in healthcare, I had such a loss of identity. And I just remember crying to my husband and being like, I don't know what I want to do, where I want to be. And again, that's when human design really kind of stepped in and helped me. But even when you become a mom and you kind of lose that identity of your pre-mom self when you're in the thick of, fourth trimester and postpartum, and just being able to sit with the grief and use tools to heal through it can be so impactful.
100%. And to have like a variety of different tools. Something that I learned through my own experience is the first time I would call like my first awakening that I had was when I was 16 years old and made the choice to go to therapy for the first time. Just due to seeing a lot of dynamics around me that I grew up with that I I felt so awake to, and I knew that the only way to be able to change it was to get help and support, right? But talk therapy can only get you so far.
Hmm.
And I think we're starting to, as a collective, realize this now that, therapy is fantastic. It's a fantastic tool, fantastic resource. There's a lot of different forms of therapy available to us now, but that rewiring part doesn't come from talking, and especially
Hmm.
if you're talking about, something that's highly emotional. And so part of part of my studies with Move, Breathe, Heal was to bring tools that feel safe, first of all, because not everyone is, if you're in crisis mode, going to a yoga class might not be the best regulation tool for you
Hmm.
in that moment, right? We've got to kind of build our system back up to being able to go into a group setting or go into a a very stretchy, bendy yoga class when trauma lives in our bodies, right? So to be able to offer a variety of different tools for different phases of the nervous system and to gently be able to create safety in our bodies again, it's just, I love the time that we're in, that we're able to learn about these things and to be able to share it with other people now.
Yeah. Ashley, do you want to share some of your favorite tools that you use to regulate either yourself or ones you share with clients? And I know I can share one first, that I learned, but I love to dance to regulate
Mm,
my nervous system. So if I'm feeling like especially pent up energy, like I love to rage dance where you just put on some crazy music and you can just dance however you want. You can, hit the bed, pillows, whatever you want. And then like even after I pick my daughter up from daycare, like we just dance in the living room for a little bit, just let her get out all those energies and kind of like re-regulate different parts or grounding. I love to ground, which I talked about on my previous podcast, and just retouching back to earth. But what are some of your favorites that either you teach or that you personally like?
yes. Real quick, I do just want to say I love that you're already teaching Summer this stuff, your daughter. That is
Oh yeah.
incredible, amazing. And isn't it funny how a lot of the things that kids naturally do to self-soothe, like getting the wiggles out or swaying back and forth, and those are all things that we're supposed to be doing to regulate ourselves too. We've just been told our whole lives, hold still, don't be too loud, make sure you're being polite in public and all these things. So it's funny. Um, as far as a couple of my favorite regulation tools, I also love rage dancing. It's one of my favorite. I'm having like a really angry day, that's one of the best ways to get it out is to just throw on some music and shake it out and stomp your
Mhm.
feet into the ground or, screaming into a pillow. I know it sounds really intense, but our vagus nerve is, tied to our throat. And so it quite literally gets that angry energy out of your body. When we're angry, the purpose of anger is actually to get us into a state of fighting, like physically fighting. And if we're going back to primal instincts, it actually goes to our jaw too and encourages us to, bite hard. This is why we get jaw clenching and neck pain and things like that. So we physically need to move that emotion out of our bodies. And if we don't, it will stay there. It will stay stuck and you will get rigid, and
It just builds.
eventually have chronic pain and sickness and all these things. But if you are, this is my personal favorite. As someone who gets stuck in what's called freeze response or dorsal vagal shutdown is another name for it. It's when we're feeling like, we're endlessly scrolling on the couch. We know we need to get up and do something, but we just can't get up. And then the shame spiral begins. We're literally frozen, stuck. The bigger movements can overwhelm the system in those times. So if you're feeling like, you're depressed or you've been stuck in a freeze mode, you can't get off the couch, one of my very favorite tools for this is rocking. So if you're like laying on the floor, laying on the bed, you can lay, on your side in the fetal position and just kind of place one hand in front of your chest. I'm trying to because I know there's not visuals in this, so I'm trying to explain this the best I can. But laying on your side in the fetal position and just rocking back and forth. There's a reason why babies love to be rocked to sleep. And what it does is it completely resets your nervous system. If you do that laying on each side, just rocking back and forth for like a minute on one side, a minute on the other, or you can rock your hips. Like if you're laying on your stomach, you can rock your hips side to side. You can stand up and sway side to side, just really gentle, loving side to side movements is going to join both sides of the brain together. Going on a walk is another example of this. You're joining both the right brain and left brain together. And what it does is it completely resets your nervous system. So if you were, in a heightened state of like fight or flight, or if you're in a lowered state of freeze or feeling like you want to fawn and hide, rocking is a great place to start.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Ashley. I need to try that one because sometimes I feel like even if you get stuck on the scroll, just using,
Mm-hmm.
could I use that if I'm scrolling and I get stuck, or is there
Yes.
another method you have to break out? Because sometimes you just get in that headspace where you just don't want to think about anything, and Instagram or TikTok or, just the scroll just kind of helps numb you. But then,
Yes.
you do get stuck into that. So is that something you could use for that, or is there another tool that you could share about that?
Yes. So those platforms are really tricky on our brains. They certainly know what they're doing by making it as addictive as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so that endless scroll is basically our brains just trying to self-soothe itself. But again, emotions being held in the body don't get released through staying still. They get released in the body through movement. And if you're in a place where you're just like, I cannot get up off of this freaking couch, I don't want to go for a walk, things like that. A walk feels like too much. Doing the dishes feels like too much right now, and you're just stuck and numb. Those rocking movements are so great. And these are some of the things that I teach. I also have a 5-minute vagus nerve reset exercise that can be found. I'll give you the link
I'll
for
link it in
it,
the show
Taryn.
notes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pay as you wish option that I have, and you have lifetime access to it. And basically, it's a vagus nerve resetting tool using eye movements, which is similar to what they do in like EMDR therapy and things like that, that just completely reset you from where you're at. One of the ways of releasing that pent up energy in our body is actually through yawning, through swallowing, or taking one of those really deep physiological sighs, like the we all do it like every so often throughout the day. And so do our animals. I don't, if you ever notice, dogs will get up and shake, or dogs will heavy sigh when they go to lay down and they're resetting. So, this 5-minute vagus nerve reset does exactly that. No matter what state you're in, all you need to do is sit and find a place to sit down, plant your feet into the ground, and practice this eye movement exercise until you swallow, sigh, or until you release in the ways that are said in the meditation. And it will get you to get up and do the dishes. It will get you to get up and go on that walk that you want to. And you're shaming yourself into continuing to stay frozen while you're, scrolling TikTok or whatever. And you're like, I know I need to get up. I know I need to get up. One more video, one more video, one more scroll. Put the phone down and do one of these exercises, whether it's rocking, whether it's, any of the things that we just said, deep belly breathing, taking a big sigh. Those are some things that you can do to get up off the couch. The rocking, the vagus nerve reset, any of those things to get into the next thing you're supposed to be doing.
Amazing. Well, Ashley, this has been so informational and so educational. So if there was a listener that was like, wow, I need Ashley in my life, where can we find you, Ashley?
So you can find me and all of my tools that I offer on Instagram at Move Breathe Heal, or at www.movebreatheheal.com. That will have all of my offerings and all the ways that you can work with me as well.
Yeah, Ashley's Instagram account has just been on fire lately. She's been sharing some really great tips. Definitely check out her Instagram and send her a message if you want. I know that I plan on doing a 8-week long course, and Ashley will be for sure coming in as a guest speaker and leading some sessions. So look forward to that if you're interested in
Yay!
working more with Ashley and down the line. But Ashley, I just want to thank you again so much for your time, and I think we made a great impact on a lot of our listeners today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Taryn.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, please share with a friend or follow the Beautiful People podcast to continue to help this platform reach others. Thinking you want to learn more about having your own energy reading? Head on over to TarynJohnson.com and sign up for a reading, group accountability coaching, or one-on-one coaching with yours truly. Lastly, if you feel called to share your story on the podcast, please send an email to Taryn@TarynJohnson.com. Remember, everyone has a story worth telling. Now go and have a beautiful day.